Okay, honey. The show is over. Go back to the tape.
All right, honey, the show's over. Get back behind the tape. The shout from Officer Mike Dempsey sliced through the air, cutting through the wail of sirens and the sharp crackle of timber. He wasn't just speaking, he was commanding, using the familiar, patronizing tone he reserved for those he considered lesser. Halloween night at the old Miller farm was turning into a mess. The fire was swallowing the haunted barn, and Officer Dempsey, instead of holding his assigned perimeter, had marched himself right into the command zone. With 30 years on the force, Dempsey believed he could smell trouble. His gut, the same gut that had helped him catch more than a few dangerous criminals, was screaming that this scene was out of control. And to Dempsey, out of control meant he wasn't the one in charge. His 30-year gut locked onto the center of the chaos, a small-statured black woman standing among the massive male firefighters, yelling and pointing. He didn't see the captain's insignia on her soot-covered helmet. He just saw a Halloween actor or a nosy civilian playing make-believe. He strode over, his massive shadow falling over her. "Did you hear me?" Dempsey barked when she ignored him, her eyes still locked on the flames. He reached out and grabbed her arm, a violent act, an abuse of power built on 30 years of experience, or rather, 30 years of prejudice. "I said, this is men's work. Go home and bake some cookies or something. You people always get in the way." Dempsey believed he was restoring order, but the very gut he had always trusted had just betrayed him, spectacularly. This very act, the rough grab and the public insult, was about to become the single greatest mistake of Mike Dempsey's career. He had no way of knowing that the small black woman he had just called "you people" was not an actor. She was Captain Imani Jordan, the incident commander, the single highest-ranking person at this fire. And Officer Dempsey had just started a deadly 3-minute countdown. 5 minutes earlier, Captain Jordan's truck, Engine 12, had been the first to arrive. The moment she stepped out of the cab, the smell hit her, and it wasn't just the acrid smoke or the sting of melting plastic from the props. Beneath it all was a scent that punched her straight in the gut, the sweet, earthy smell of damp autumn soil, burning hay, and the unmistakable aroma of the spiced apple cider that Miller's farm was famous for. This wasn't just another structure fire. It was an assault on her childhood. Imani Jordan had grown up in Maple Creek. She had her first Halloween here, dressed as Wonder Woman, eating a candy apple on the very porch that was now beginning to smolder. This barn was a piece of her, a piece of the town's memory. "Engine 12 to dispatch." Her voice was calm, cutting through the chaos of teenagers in zombie makeup running past her. "We are on scene at the Miller farm. We have a 2-story barn, fully involved. I am establishing Miller Command. I need a second alarm and all available mutual aid. Confirming reports of civilians trapped." She was pure, focused professionalism. Her eyes scanned the crowd and found a familiar, frantic face at the edge of the scene. Old man Miller, the owner, his face pale with horror, watching his 40-year legacy go up in smoke. She pointed to her lieutenant, Kaito Tanaka, who was already pulling equipment. "Tanaka, get a statement from Mr. Miller. Find out exactly where those teens were last seen. Then get your team ready for primary search. I want thermal imaging on the west wall." She was already moving, her mind calculating wind speed, water supply, and the fastest way to stop the fire before it took her memories with it. While Captain Jordan was organizing the rescue, Officer Dempsey was parking his cruiser, his temples throbbing in time with the thump, thump, thump of the electronic Halloween music blaring from the festival speakers. He hated this night. 30 years ago, Halloween was kids in simple masks getting candy. Now it was a loud, obnoxious, chaotic circus. He felt old, irrelevant, and angry. He was supposed to be at the perimeter, but he saw the mess near the barn and decided to assert some real authority. He stomped past his designated line, his eyes scanning the scene with disgust. That's when he saw Old Man Miller, the farm's owner, frantically trying to talk to a young patrolman. "But you don't understand," Miller was pleading, his voice thin with panic. "The vampire's lair. That's where they—" Dempsey cut him off, waving a dismissive hand. Okay, old-timer, you gotta move back. Let the professionals work. But I was telling him. Miller insisted, grabbing Dempsey's sleeve. My grandson, he and his friends. Sir, back, now, Dempsey barked, pulling his arm away from the old man's grasp. He shoved Miller, gently but firmly, back toward the police tape. Am I the only one who knows how to do their job around here? He muttered to himself. First the old man, now this. He was surrounded by incompetence. His eyes swept the command post, and that's when he saw her, the small black woman in the middle of it all, playing commander. All his frustration at the music, at the old man, at his own feeling of being obsolete congealed into a single point of pure prejudice. He marched forward, his shadow falling over her, his mind made up. All right, honey, the show's over. Get back behind the tape. He barked the order, but she didn't even look at him, her eyes still locked on the flames. He repeated himself. Did you hear me? Still, she ignored him. Enraged, he reached out and grabbed her arm. I said, this is men's work. Go home and bake some cookies or something. You people always get in the way. The command post went silent. The music still thumped, the fire still roared, but all the nearby firefighters had frozen, watching this unfold. Captain Jordan slowly turned her head, her eyes just visible behind her soot-streaked visor, locking onto his. Her voice was dangerously quiet, colder than the October air. Officer, take your hand. Off my arm. Now. Or what? Captain? Dempsey sneered, his voice a low growl. Instead of letting go, his fingers tightened on her arm, the heavy leather of his glove digging into her turnout coat. You'll have me arrested? You in what army? Captain Jordan yanked her arm free with a violent twist, a move that sent a sharp pain up her shoulder, but was infinitely better than his touch. Officer, she said, her voice dropping to a deadly controlled level, I am the incident commander. You are interfering with my operation. Return to the perimeter. Her authoritative tone, coming from a woman he had already dismissed, was like throwing gasoline on a fire. Dempsey turned to the two massive and white firefighters standing nearby, who were watching with wide, uncomfortable eyes. You guys hear this? She's in charge? He laughed, a short barking sound. This is what happens when you let the diversity hires run the show. I bet she's never seen a real fire in her life. Probably gets her nails done in the truck. This was a tactic designed to isolate her from her own men, to paint her as an outsider. But it failed. The firefighters just looked away, their faces grim with embarrassment not for her, but for him. Just then, Lieutenant Kato Tanaka arrived at Jordan's side. Officer, with all due respect, Tanaka said, his voice firm, you are making a massive mistake. This is Captain Jordan, and she is the incident commander. We need you to step aside. Dempsey, enraged that the kid was defending her, shoved Tanaka lightly in the chest. Stay out of this, son, he growled. This is between me and her. Captain Jordan ignored Dempsey as if he had ceased to exist. Her focus was on the fire, which, sensing her distraction, had just found a new source of fuel. With a deafening, prolonged whoosh and a high-pitched scream of tortured wood, the entire front porch of the barn, the iconic spot, the heart of the farm, tore free from the main structure. It hung suspended for a terrible second before collapsing in on itself, sending a volcano of sparks, embers, and burning memories into the night sky. The sight of it sent a sharp physical pain through her chest. This wasn't just a building, it was a landmark of her childhood. She was suddenly, vividly 10 years old, dressed in a cheap plastic Wonder Woman costume, the mask digging uncomfortably into her cheeks. She was standing on that exact porch, the rough-hewn boards solid beneath her feet. Her fingers were sticky from a bright red candy apple that old man Miller himself had given her. Well now, his voice, weathered as the barn wood, echoed in her memory. Looks like Maple Creek's real heroes here. You'll keep us safe, won't you, Imani? He had given her a free pumpkin every single year after that, right up until the day she left for college, promising to come back and keep the town safe for real. That memory, so clear, so pure, so good, cut straight through the acrid smoke and the frantic wail of the sirens. This wasn't just a command. It was a crusade. She was not letting this barn burn down. She would not let this piece of their collective past, her past, be erased by the flames. And she certainly, absolutely, would not be stopped by the ignorant, bitter man standing next to her. That memory solidified her resolve, forging her anger into pure steel. She turned her back on Dempsey, a complete and total dismissal. It was as if she had slammed a fireproof door between them. He was no longer a person, he was just a piece of scenery, an obstacle to be moved, as irrelevant as a fallen branch. She raised her radio, her voice ringing out with a renewed, cold authority that made her firefighters snap to attention. Tanaka, get back to your team. Engine 4, I need a supply line from the hydrant on Miller Road. I want a 2.5-inch attack line on that west wall now. Move, people. We are not losing this structure. Her ability to completely compartmentalize to shut him out and continue commanding her team flawlessly was a testament to her years of training and discipline. But to Officer Dempsey, watching her back, it was the ultimate infuriating insult. It proved that he was, in her world, completely and utterly irrelevant. The rage building in Officer Dempsey was a physical thing, hot and acidic. Being dismissed by her was one thing. Being dismissed in front of her crew, this younger generation of firefighters who looked at her with such respect, was something else entirely. He felt his authority, his 30 years of experience, his very manhood, evaporating in the cold night air. He had to prove he was still in charge, that he was useful. His eyes darted around, searching for a way to assert his control. He saw a high-caliber hose line, a deck gun, lying on the ground, not currently in use. In his mind, he knew what to do. He would show them what a real professional looked like. He strode over to the heavy canvas and brass equipment. He grabbed the massive nozzle, intending to aim it at the flare-up on the west wall. He braced himself, ready for the powerful kick of the water. But there was no kick. The hose was limp, empty. He fumbled with the complex coupling, his thick gloves making him clumsy. He twisted the nozzle. Nothing. A young firefighter, barely 20, saw him, and his eyes went wide with panic. "Sir, no, stop! That line isn't charged. You can't—" Dempsey looked utterly foolish. A big, angry man holding a useless piece of equipment, looking like a child playing dress-up. He dropped the nozzle as if it were hot. Captain Jordan, who had seen the entire pathetic display out of the corner of her eye, finally turned to him. Her voice, amplified by the tension, cut through the night. "Officer, drop the equipment," she shouted, though he already had. "You are not certified. You are not on my team. You are a civilian on this fireground. And right now, sir, you are a liability." Being called a civilian, being called a liability, in front of everyone, in front of the men. It was the final unbearable humiliation. The obsolete man had just been publicly embarrassed by the diversity hire. The rage in his head went white hot, silencing all reason. He dropped the pretense of helping and stormed back toward her, his entire body rigid, his fists clenched. You called me a liability?" He raised his hand, not to hit, but to grab, to physically remove her from the post she was unfit to hold. But just as he lunged, just as his fingers were about to close on her coat, the radio on her chest erupted with a new, terrified, static-filled voice. "Mayday, mayday, partial collapse. The main stairs are gone. We have 2 civilians trapped on the 2nd floor. We are trapped. We need help now." The word mayday sliced through the air, silencing everything. It is the single most terrifying word on a fireground, a signal that a firefighter is lost, trapped, or down. The mission instantly changes from fighting the fire to rescuing their own. For Captain Imani Jordan, the world compressed. All noise, the fire, the music, Dempsey's insults faded. Her training took over. She was the incident commander, and her people were trapped. She spun, ripping the haunted house blueprint from the command board. The mayday call came from the vampire's lair on the 2nd floor. The main stairs were gone. "RIT team, activate!" Her voice was a laser, cutting through the panic. "I need a ladder to the vampire's lair window, 2nd story, west side. Tanaka, get your line diverted to cover that ladder. Now!" She had zero time for Dempsey. He was an obstacle. She had to get past him to the command board. She put a hand up, a stop gesture, directly in his face, without looking at him. "Do not speak," she commanded, her voice vibrating with pure adrenalized authority. "Do not move. Get out of my way." She tried to push past him, but this to Officer Dempsey was the final unforgivable insult. Her giving him an order? Her dismissing him while she was panicking? Her female hysteria was endangering the scene. In his mind, he wasn't assaulting her. He was saving the scene from her. It was his breaking point. He grabbed her, not by the arm, but by the shoulders of her heavy turnout coat. "You don't give me orders, you little—" he roared, his voice cracking, his face purple with rage. He shook her, a small, dark figure, lost in his massive grip. "I told you!" he bellowed, his voice carrying over the sirens. "A woman's place is not here! This is men's work!" And then he shoved her. It wasn't a small push. It was a violent, two-handed assault, fueled by 30 years of prejudice and a night of humiliation. Captain Jordan, weighed down by her heavy air pack and boots, was completely unprepared. She was thrown backward, her boots catching on a coiled, heavy-gauge hose line. She stumbled, arms flailing, and crashed hard onto the cold, unforgiving pavement. Her helmet hit the ground with a sickening, heavy clack that echoed in the sudden, horrified silence. From the police tape, Old Man Miller, the subplot witness, screamed, his voice thin and cracking. "My God, he pushed her. That officer, he knocked her down." For a single terrible second, everything stopped. The clack of her helmet on the pavement seemed to sever the very flow of time. The firefighters who had been scrambling to follow her Mayday orders froze, their faces masks of pure disbelief. Lieutenant Tanaka and the two firefighters on his line, the vital line meant to cover the rescue ladder, simply dropped the heavy hose. The brass nozzle thudded to the ground, useless. Their training screamed at them to follow the last order, but their loyalty, their humanity screamed louder. "Captain!" Tanaka yelled, his voice cracking with panic. He and the other two men abandoned their post, abandoning the rescue, and rushed toward their fallen commander. "Captain, are you okay? Talk to me!" On the ground, air had been knocked from Imani's lungs. A sharp, searing pain was exploding in her lower back, and her head was ringing. But all of that was drowned out by the sound from the radio still attached to her chest, a sound only she could hear, the frantic, terrified breathing of her trapped team. A white-hot fury, far stronger than any pain, ripped through her. This wasn't just an assault, it was a betrayal of the entire system. Dempsey hadn't just attacked her, he had attacked the rescue. "I'm fine," she roared, a raw, guttural sound. She scrambled to her feet, ignoring Tanaka's outstretched hand, pushing him away. "Get back on that hose!" she screamed, pointing not at Dempsey, but at her own crew. "That is a direct order. Get on the hose." But it was too late. The command structure was shattered. The all-right team, already at the base of the ladder, was waiting for their cover line. The ladder team was waiting for the hose. The team trapped on the second floor was waiting for the ladder. And while they waited, the fire grew. Officer Dempsey just stood there, breathing heavily, his hands still half raised. He was stunned, shocked by the sudden violence of what he'd done. But a dark part of him, the part that felt obsolete, was still defiant. The radio on her chest crackled again, the voice inside now frantic, thin with smoke. "Captain, where are you? We need orders. The fire is closing in. We don't have time." This entire sequence, the shove, the fall, the crew's distraction, the break in the chain of command, the screaming order to get back to work, ate up 1 minute, then 2, then 3. 3 full, agonizing minutes, stolen from the trapped firefighters and the terrified teenagers, all because one man couldn't stand to see a black woman in charge. Captain Jordan was finally back on her feet. The pain in her back was a sharp, stabbing betrayal, but she forced it down, locked it away in a mental box. She was fueled by pure, unadulterated adrenaline. Her crew was finally scrambling back to the hose, their faces pale with shame and fear. But they were moving. The 3-minute delay was over, but those 3 minutes had cost them. The smoke pouring from the second-story window was no longer just black. It was an angry, pressurized, churning orange, a sign that a flashover was imminent. She had to regain control of the chaos he had caused. She had to save her team. She ignored Dempsey, who was still standing there, a useless, gaping statue. She ignored the pain. She raised her radio, opening her mouth to scream the new orders, to reroute the attack, to somehow claw back those 180 seconds. But before she could speak, a new sound cut through the sirens, a sound so jarring and electronic that it made everyone flinch. It was the loud, piercing squeal of a police PA system clicking on, followed by a sudden, deafening pop of feedback. The sound boomed across the entire farm, echoing off the barn and the assembled trucks, silencing the crowd, freezing the firefighters, and stopping even the flow of Dempsey's defiant thoughts. Then a new voice, a voice not of panic or anger, but of cold, absolute, and terrifying authority, boomed over the entire scene. It was amplified, distorted, and louder than the fire itself. "Officer Dempsey, what in God's name do you think you are doing?" Dempsey froze. His blood ran colder than the October air. He recognized that voice. He turned slowly, mechanically, his face draining of all its angry purple color, leaving it a ghostly, mottled white. A new command vehicle, a dark blue police chief's SUV, had pulled up onto the grass, unnoticed in the chaos of the last 3 minutes. Its lights were now flashing, catching the smoke and the horrified faces of the crowd. Standing by the open door, microphone clutched in his white-knuckled fist, was Police Chief Marcus Davies. He had seen everything. The world seemed to stop. The roar of the fire, the frantic radio calls, all of it was drowned out by the thunderous, amplified voice of Police Chief Marcus Davies. "Dempsey, what in God's name do you think you are doing?" Dempsey's hand, which had been raised to grab Captain Jordan, was still half in the air, frozen like a statue in the flashing blue and red lights. He stammered, his voice suddenly thin and weak, a pathetic whisper compared to the boom from the PA system. "Chief, I was just trying to restore order. She wasn't listening." "Order?" Chief Davies' voice was now off the microphone, sharp as glass, as he strode across the muddy field. He didn't even glance at Captain Jordan. His eyes were locked on his subordinate, a look of such cold, profound disgust that Dempsey visibly flinched. "You call assaulting a fire captain during a live Mayday order?" I thought she was a civilian. She's the incident commander, you idiot," Davies roared, finally stopping a foot in front of Dempsey. "I don't care if she was wearing a clown suit. You never touch a commander on a fire ground. Ever." Davies didn't wait for another excuse. His first priority was neutralizing the threat his department had created. He pointed to another officer, a younger man named Kent, who was watching with a mix of horror and shame. "Officer Kent," Davies commanded, his voice all business. "Escort Officer Dempsey to my vehicle. He is relieved of duty, effective immediately. Secure his weapon, secure his badge. I want him sitting in that passenger seat until I get there. Is that clear?" "Yes, Chief," Kent responded instantly, relieved to have a clear order. Dempsey, stripped of all his bluster, his 30 years of experience rendered meaningless, suddenly looked exactly like what he feared he was, an old, pathetic, and obsolete man. He didn't resist. He allowed Officer Kent to take his arm, the same arm he had used to grab Jordan, and lead him away through the smoke, past the silent, watching firefighters. Old Man Miller, still standing by the tape, watched him go, shaking his head in disbelief. In 30 seconds, Mike Dempsey's career was over. The second Officer Dempsey was out of her path. Captain Jordan proved why she was the incident commander. She did not waste a single precious second acknowledging what had just happened. She didn't look at Chief Davies. She didn't rub her bruised back. She didn't cry. She didn't complain. And she didn't explain. She simply stepped back to her command post, her body a rigid line of pure, focused duty. The pain, the humiliation, the rage, she locked it all away. There would be time for that later. Now there were lives to save. She grabbed her radio, and her voice, raw but powerful, cut through the stunned silence. "All teams, command! We are back in operation!" She roared, the command itself a physical force. "The 3-minute delay is over. Tanaka, I want that cover line on the ladder. Now!" Her crew, who had been frozen in shock watching the police drama unfold, snapped back to reality. The shame of their inaction and the sight of their captain, assaulted and still in command, energized them with a desperate, focused adrenaline. "Yes, Captain!" Tanaka yelled, his voice cracking. He and his team grabbed the heavy hose and scrambled to get it in position. "Right, team! Go, go, go!" Jordan continued, her eyes fixed on the vampire's lair window, which was now pulsing in angry, deep orange. "Ladder 12, window on the second story, west side. Report status." It was a masterful display of pure, undiluted professionalism. The chaos Dempsey had created was instantly gone, replaced by the disciplined order of her command. Chief Marcus Davies, who had been about to offer a stunned apology, simply stopped. He stood back, his mouth slightly open, and watched her work. He was a cop, but he recognized a true commander when he saw one. He turned his own attention to his real job, securing the real perimeter and ensuring none of his other officers got in her way. He let the true commander do her job. This part was pure heroic action, a sharp and brilliant contrast to the ugly, personal chaos Dempsey had created. The moment Captain Jordan gave the order, her team executed. Lieutenant Tanaka and his men, fueled by a mixture of shame and adrenaline, wrestled the heavy hose line into position. "Water! Water! Water!" Tanaka roared into his radio. A second later, the line bucked in their hands and a powerful, solid stream of water shot from the nozzle, blasting the vampire's lair window. It wasn't about putting the fire out from there. It was about pushing the flames back, carving a survivable path for the rescue, shielding the ladder. "Covering!" Tanaka yelled up to the RI team, the spray soaking them. The rapid intervention team, 2 firefighters bundled in heavy, specialized gear, were already on the ladder. They didn't hesitate. They climbed, ascending past the flames, disappearing into the pressurized, churning column of black smoke that was vomiting from the second-story window. The crowd below, which had been murmuring in shock, was now utterly silent. A sea of faces turned upward, watching the 2 figures ascend into the inferno. Captain Jordan stood at her command post, her hands still gripping her radio so tightly her knuckles were white. She was immobile, a statue of pure focus, her mind 50 feet in the air, inside that room with her team. She tracked their every second. The wait was agonizing. It stretched 10 seconds, 30, a full, terrible minute. The only sounds in the world were the roar of the water and the deep, angry groan of the barn's internal structure. Chief Davies stood by his car, his own police radio forgotten. He was just a witness now, watching her. Then finally, the radio on her chest crackled to life, the voice blessedly clear. "RIT to command. We have them. We have our RIT team member and both civilians. They're conscious, heavy smoke inhalation. We are coming out." A collective sigh, like a physical wave, rolled through the crowd. A moment later, the black square of the window was filled. First, a firefighter, his helmet and mask silhouetted against the orange glow guiding the way. Then a terrified teenager, his werewolf mask hanging lopsided from his neck, coughing uncontrollably. He was followed by his friend, a girl in a vampire costume, her face pale as a ghost beneath the streaks of fake blood. The RIT team members guided them onto the ladder, shielding them with their own bodies as they made the slow, careful descent back to the solid ground. Captain Jordan watched unblinking as their feet touched the grass and they were rushed to the waiting EMS stretchers. Only then, when they were officially safe, did she allow her body to react. She closed her eyes for a single second and took one deep, shuddering intake of breath. The immediate crisis was over. Her eyes opened and found Old Man Miller, who was leaning heavily against a police car at the tape, his face wet with tears of profound relief. He saw her looking. He put a hand over his heart. She gave him a single tired nod. The teens were safe, and the barn, his barn, was still standing. With the teens safe and the fire now being brought under control by the rest of her team, Chief Davies approached Captain Jordan. The adrenaline was fading, being replaced by a deep, throbbing ache in her back. "Captain Jordan." "Imani," Davies said, his voice low. "Are you all right? That was inexcusable. I saw the whole thing from my car." Jordan nodded, wincing as she shifted her weight. "I'm fine, Chief. The kids are fine. That's what matters. She looked at him, her eyes clear and hard. But we will talk about this. His order almost cost those kids their lives. Davies nodded grimly. We will. He's in my car, waiting. But the question is, what happens next is up to you. Assaulting a first responder, you could end his career. Tonight. The smell of wet ashes and cold plastic hung in the 3 a.m. air. The fire was out. The haunted barn, though heavily damaged, was still standing, a testament to the work Captain Jordan's team had done after the delay. Now in the sterile, fluorescent light of the mobile command trailer, Mike Dempsey looked like a different man. He was no longer the large, imposing, rage-filled officer. He sat hunched over on a small stool, his uniform stained with soot and firefighting foam. He looked smaller, older, and utterly broken. The 30 years of experience looked more like 30 years of decay. Across the small table, Captain Imani Jordan sat perfectly, painfully straight, refusing to show the agony radiating from her lower back. Lieutenant Tanaka sat beside her, silent, present as her witness. At the head of the table, Police Chief Marcus Davies stood, his face a grim mask of exhaustion and duty. Next to Dempsey sat his police union representative, a tired-looking man in a rumpled suit, his briefcase open on his lap, looking like he'd already lost. All right, Chief Davies said, his voice flat, breaking the silence. It's 0315. Let's get the accounting done. He picked up a clipboard and began to read in a cold, official monotone. Officer Michael Dempsey, as of 2032 this evening, you are on administrative leave pending termination. He continued. The preliminary report includes abandonment of your assigned post, unauthorized entry into a hot zone, verbal harassment of a fellow officer, insubordination, and the physical assault of an incident commander during a live Mayday operation. The air in the trailer was thick and suffocating. The only sound was the low hum of the generator outside. Davies put the clipboard down and looked at Jordan. Captain, Lieutenant Tanaka's body camera footage, as well as my own dash cam, corroborates every second of this. The 3-minute delay is documented. The case against him is airtight. He sighed. The floor is yours. Your testimony will determine the final outcome. Tell me what you want, and it's done. Dempsey's union rep, sensing his moment, leaned forward, his voice practiced and smooth. Chief, if I may, Officer Dempsey has 30 years of decorated service. It was a confusing, chaotic scene. The lighting was poor, the music was disorienting, and he truly believed. Don't, a voice croaked. The rep stopped, annoyed. Mike, don't say anything. But Dempsey, who had been staring at his own hands, slowly looked up. His eyes were hollow, red-rimmed, and for the first time, they met Jordan's. It's true, he whispered, his voice a dry, rasping thing. All of it. I thought she was... I don't know what I thought. Captain Jordan sat forward in her metal chair, and the movement sent a sharp electric jolt up her spine from the spot where she'd hit the pavement. She bit back a wince, refusing to show weakness, but the pain was a physical reminder of the assault. She looked at Dempsey, not with anger, but with the cold, analytical gaze of a commander assessing a catastrophic failure. You didn't know what you thought, she repeated, her voice low and even. That's the problem. You didn't think at all. She turned her gaze to Chief Davies, but she was still speaking to Dempsey. You thought I was a woman. You thought I was black. And in your mind, the mind of an obsolete man, as you've been telling yourself, that meant I couldn't possibly be in charge. Dempsey flinched, as if she had read his mind. Your prejudice, officer, she continued, her voice gaining a hard steel edge, is not just an HR issue. On that fire ground, it became a public safety hazard. You didn't see a captain. You saw a category. You didn't see an incident commander. You saw a problem that offended your worldview. She leaned forward again, this time ignoring the pain, her eyes locking onto his. You're worried about your 30-year career. I was worried about those 3 minutes. Do you have any idea what happens in 3 minutes on a fire ground like that? Do you know what a flashover is, officer? Do you know how fast a roof can collapse? Do you know the difference between heavy smoke and toxic, unsurvivable soup? She didn't wait for an answer. Those 3 minutes you stole from us, those were the minutes those kids were suffocating. Those were the minutes my RIT team was waiting for a cover line, exposed. You didn't just push me, Dempsey. You endangered everyone. The trailer was dead silent. The union rep stared at his legal pad. Chief Davies finally broke the silence, his voice grim. So you agree with termination, Captain? It's your call. Say the word, and it's done. A heavy, suffocating silence filled the trailer. Officer Dempsey, who had been staring at the floor, braced himself, closing his eyes, waiting for the final, career-ending blow. The union rep just shuffled his papers, preparing to argue a fight he knew he'd already lost. Chief Davies looked at Captain Jordan, his pen poised over the report. Captain? Jordan took a long, slow breath, letting it out. The pain in her back was a dull, throbbing reminder. No, Chief, she said, her voice quiet but clear. I don't. Everyone, especially Dempsey and his rep, looked up in the stunned disbelief. Dempsey's eyes, red and swollen, were wide with a confusion that replaced his shame. The union rep's mouth hung open. Imani? What? Chief Davies said, lowering his pen. He assaulted you. He endangered your team. And if you fire him, Jordan said, her gaze steady, he just goes home. He becomes an angry, unemployed racist who sits at the Maple Creek Diner every morning, telling everyone how I, the affirmative action hire, got him fired. He learns nothing. He just gets angrier, and his prejudice is confirmed. You're not solving the problem, Chief. You're just moving it. Davies leaned back, genuinely perplexed. So what are you proposing, Captain? A slap on the wrist? He attacked you. I'm not proposing a slap, Jordan said, her voice turning to ice. I'm proposing education. He's suspended for 2 weeks, unpaid, starting tomorrow. And he is mandated to attend physical training with my crew at Station 12 every morning, 6 a.m., for 6 months. The union rep finally found his voice, jumping to his feet. That's irregular. It's unorthodox. You can't. That's cruel and unusual. Jordan didn't even look at the rep. Her eyes, cold and hard as steel, locked onto Dempsey's for the first time. It's not punishment, officer. It's training. You said this was men's work. I want you to come and see what the work actually is. I want you to see the women and the men you insulted in action. I want you to haul the hoses, clean the trucks, and see if you can keep up with Lieutenant Tanaka. After 6 months, then we'll see if you've learned anything about men's work. She stood up, wincing, but never breaking eye contact. Chief Davies looked at Dempsey, then at Jordan, and a slow, calculating look crossed his face. He understood. He looked back at his broken officer. It's either that, Mike, or you hand me your badge. Right now. Your choice. The 5:45 a.m. Alarm felt like a slap in the face. It was a sound Mike Dempsey hadn't heard in 20 years. He stood in the pre-dawn darkness, in the cold, misty November air, outside the bay doors of Station 12. He wasn't wearing his pressed police uniform. He was in a pair of old gray sweatpants he dug out of a bottom drawer, ones that hadn't fit him properly in a decade. He felt exposed, ridiculous, and more vulnerable than he had in his entire 30-year career. This was his choice. It was this, or hand over his badge. It was humiliation, or termination. At 6 a.m. on the dot, the massive bay doors rolled up with a heavy grinding sound. And there, in the warm yellow light of the station, stood Captain Imani Jordan. She wasn't in her command coat. She was dressed in simple, functional PT, physical training gear, her hair pulled back. She held a stopwatch. She looked at him, her face impossible to read. There was no anger, no triumph, just assessment. Good, she said, her voice echoing in the bay. You're on time. Get in here. The first day was, in a word, brutal. Dempsey, in his mid-50s and conditioned by 30 years in a patrol car, was gasping for air 2 minutes into the warm-up, his lungs burning, a sharp stitch in his side. He watched, horrified, as Jordan, who he dismissed as a little woman, led the entire drill, her voice calling out commands as she ran circles around him, not even breathing hard. He watched as Lieutenant Tanaka, the kid he had shoved, lapped him easily on the track, his feet barely seeming to touch the ground. He watched as two female firefighters, women he would have dismissed as girls, moved to the weight rack and began deadlifting amounts he was fairly certain would hospitalize him. But the worst part wasn't the physical exhaustion. It was the social humiliation. They didn't haze him. They didn't mock him. They didn't even speak to him. They just worked. They were a single, cohesive, professional unit. They moved with an efficiency that left no room for his prejudice. His presence, the 30-year veteran cop, was completely and totally irrelevant to their mission. This lack of reaction, this professional indifference was more humbling, more shaming than any insult they could have thrown at him. At the end of the hour, he was bent over, hands on his knees, trying not to be sick. Tanaka walked past him, grabbing a towel. He paused, looked at Dempsey, and handed him a bottle of water. "See you tomorrow, sir," he said, his voice perfectly neutral, and walked away. The first month was a special kind of hell. It was November, cold and dark, and Dempsey's muscles ached in ways he didn't know were possible. He was sore, he was angry, and he was profoundly isolated. After the brutal morning workouts, he was assigned the most menial, humbling tasks: scrubbing the toilets, mopping the bay floor, and polishing the bright work on Engine 12, the very truck he had ignored. He did it all with a sullen, simmering rage, still believing this was a punishment, not an education. He'd sit alone in the station's kitchen afterward, drinking his coffee in bitter silence, while the crew he was forced to be near joked and bonded, pointedly ignoring him. By the time January rolled around, something had begun to shift. The intense soreness had faded into a dull, manageable ache. He was keeping up, barely. He'd lost 20 pounds and his old uniform pants were loose. He was no longer the cop. He was just Mike, the out-of-shape guy who showed up at 6 a.m. The crew's indifference had become a strange kind of acceptance. He was just part of the morning rhythm. He started to watch. He watched them practice with the jaws of life in the freezing yard, a drill of such intense, coordinated precision that it looked more like surgery than brute force. He started to listen. In the kitchen, he'd hear their shop talk, not gossip, but real stories of rescues, of close calls, of the time Tanaka got singed saving a dog, of the relentless, quiet competence of Captain Jordan. He learned their names. By March, the transformation was undeniable. He was part of the rhythm. He found himself arriving at 5:30 a.m., starting the industrial-sized coffee pot for the crew before they even arrived. He'd chip in for the station's breakfast fund. He was no longer just watching the drills. He was asking questions. He'd seen Captain Jordan handle a dozen minor station crises, a broken-down engine, a scheduling conflict, a firefighter dealing with a personal loss, not with anger, but with the same calm, unshakable authority she'd had at the fire. His perception, clouded by 30 years of prejudice, was finally painfully clearing. He wasn't seeing a black captain. He was just seeing his captain. It was April. The 6 months were over. After the final morning's drill, a drill Dempsey had completed without complaint, his form now solid, the crew didn't just scatter to the showers. They gathered, and Captain Jordan nodded at him. "Officer Dempsey, you did the work." Dempsey stood before them, his new, better-fitting sweatpants damp with sweat. He was no longer the imposing, angry cop. He was just Mike, a 55-year-old man who had been given a second chance he didn't deserve. He was awkward, humbled, and for the first time, he spoke to them not as a critic, but as a peer. He cleared his throat, his voice rough. "I know why I'm here. I know what I did. And I want to say I was wrong." He looked at Tanaka, at the two female firefighters, at the rest of the crew who had silently tolerated him. "What you all do, I called it men's work. I was wrong. It's not men's work. It's heroes' work." He finally turned to Captain Jordan, his eyes meeting hers, and this time there was no prejudice, only a profound, bottomless respect. "And you, Captain, you are one hell of a leader. I am truly sorry for everything." Jordan held his gaze, her face unreadable for a moment, and then she gave him a single, professional nod. "You did the work, Dempsey. That's all we ask. You're free to go. Your obligation here is finished." He nodded, a sense of finality settling in. He turned and walked out of the bay, into the bright April morning, a free man. He was walking toward his car when Jordan's voice called out, stopping him. "Officer Dempsey." He turned. "Yes, Captain." "Your suspension is over next week," she said, walking toward him. "You're back on patrol. I just got off the phone with Chief Davies. He's reassigning you." Dempsey's heart sank. He figured he'd be stuck on desk duty for the rest of his career. "Understood, Captain." "You're the new community liaison officer for the Miller Farm District," she continued, a small, almost imperceptible smile playing on her lips. "Old Man Miller is rebuilding the barn. He's planning a new, safer, haunted barn for next Halloween, and he's coordinating with the city on the safety plan." She paused. "He personally requested you to be the officer helping him coordinate. He said he saw you learning over the last few months." Dempsey was stunned. He requested me." "I told him you were a fast learner," Jordan said. "Don't prove me wrong." Dempsey looked at her, then at the station, then at his own hands, which were now strong and calloused, like a worker's. For the first time in what felt like his entire life, a real, genuine, humble smile spread across his face. "Understood, Captain," he said. I'll see you at the briefing." In the chaos of that Halloween night, Officer Dempsey's prejudice was more dangerous than any flame. He learned that the hard way. But Captain Imani Jordan, in the crew of Station 12, taught him a lesson that night's fire couldn't. That respect is not given by a uniform. It is earned through action. And that the strongest form of justice isn't always found in punishment, but in the difficult, daily work of understanding. The fire at Miller's farm was finally put out, but the real blaze extinguished that night was the one of blind prejudice in a person's heart. This story reminds us that a person's worth is never measured by their outward appearance, but by the truth and dignity they hold inside. Because in the end, true justice isn't always about punishment. Sometimes it's about the harder path of understanding and giving someone the chance to learn respect.